Hi everybody, my name is Alex Ansari and I am an urban beekeeper with Aveole, Chicago. I have had the pleasure of working with the honeybees on your property over the course of the season, and we are reaching an awesome and exciting point in our season, which is our honey harvest. So throughout the year I've been visiting every 3 weeks your beehives, and I've been doing a whole bunch of different tasks to help the bees thrive, keep them healthy, and allow them to get to a point where they can produce a lot of honey for us to enjoy. So our company, Aveole, is an urban beekeeping company, and we are really trying to get people connected to nature in cities. We want to help remove this idea that we live in these concrete jungles that are just full of cement and devoid of nature, when really, when we start looking deeper, we kind of uncover a natural world that is actually thriving amongst us. We just sometimes might not take the time to notice it, or we have too much going on in our day where we haven't really been able to focus or learn about what kind of biodiversity takes place in an urban setting. So we have chosen the honeybee to act as our ambassador, as our guide to the world of urban agriculture, and to help illuminate some of these beautiful green spaces and activities and natural occurrences that take place right beneath our feet, around nooks and crannies in the alleyways that we live nearby. And so the honeybee is a really cool and beautiful creature that interacts with our natural environment and with our food consumption too. So the honeybee has a complex world that we could delve into and we could talk forever about. But right now we're at a point in our season where we have been watching the honeybees' relationship with their outside world. And that means we're seeing what kind of flowers they're feeding on, what point in the season they're finding all the nectar from the flowers to bring back to their hive, how they're adapting to the climate. And we do this through visiting the hives and seeing how the colony's doing. We look for our queen, we look to see if they've been storing nectar and honey and all kinds of cool little kind of telltale signs and indicators that bees give us to alert us about the larger climate and the larger environment. So now that we're in our harvest season, I'm going to walk you through a day in the life of a honey harvest. So the same things we're going to do throughout this video are exactly what we do when we're on your property. We're going to go out to a beehive today, we're going to open it up, we're going to extract the honey frames, we're going to harvest those honey frames, and you'll see how that process works. Then we're going to take those frames back to our extraction room, which is actually currently right behind me. And we're going to see how we get that honey that we took out of those beehives, how we're going to get it into a jar, which is sort of the final step. So that's the extraction process. So today we'll go through and answer some of those questions that people might have, what it is going from the hive to the honey jar. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions that people have, but you can reach out to us at any point. Aveole is the name of our company, and again, my name is Alex, and I will be working closely, even through the honey harvest season, with your bees. So I'm not going anywhere. I'm here to make sure your bees are healthy and that they are going to survive the upcoming winter. And I am looking forward to sharing just a little glimpse in what a honey harvest looks like today. There's so many elements of beekeeping. I wish I had the time to talk about the whole world that we delve into as beekeepers. But today we're going to focus on our honey harvest, and I look forward to taking you along with me. All right, we'll see you out there. Hi everybody. All right, we made it out to the hive. As you can potentially hear, we are in a very urban setting. This is the epitome of urban beekeeping. Our bees are in a yard in the Ukrainian village. They have this lovely green space, but we're also surrounded by an urban setting. And so this is something that we love about beekeeping, is that they can interact in our world, and we can interact in theirs seamlessly, and they can produce honey and thrive regardless of the concrete jungle that we like to think that we live in. So we're out at the hive. This hive is just like the one on your property, so everything that we do today is going to be exactly what I do when I harvest the honey at your site. So first things first, we're going to light our smoker. This is going to help keep the bees calm. by suppressing their ability to communicate through pheromones, these smells that they release, alerting danger. So this will help us work with the bees in a little bit more calm fashion. All right, we got our smoker going. We get a nice billowy smoke. Beautiful smoke here from that burlap. We're gonna let the bees know that we're here, say hello by giving them a little puff of smoke there. Now we have our inner cover right here. We're just gonna sit right in front of the hive. Those bees will find their way back in. Outer cover we can set down here. All right. So just by looking at this hive, you can see this beautiful full box of honey here, so that's great. So the bees have been storing their honey in this hive throughout the season. This is what they're going to plan on using for the winter. I'm going to move my things here so we can start shaking some bees. Kind of a fun and scary thing to witness, but the bees have been storing this food for winter. We're going to end up taking a lot of it. We don't feel so bad about doing that because the bees' population is going to decrease over winter. They're not going to need all of this food. We're going to make sure to leave them plenty for them to get through the winter. So we're going to gently crack this. Wow, this is a beautiful frame of honey. So you can see this like perfect sheet. It's completely flat. This is like an ideal frame of honey. So all this white waxy stuff, the bees use their own beeswax to cap over the dehydrated nectar. They lowered the water content of the nectar. It got thick enough to be honey, 17% water content to be specific. And they capped it over, and this is how they're gonna store it. So we know that this is good for us to take. So I go and shake these bees off. Set them in this box right here so that when we come back to our warehouse or go through your building, we're not bringing any bees with us. And seal that up. Wow, this hive has been working so hard and so... The architecture is fantastic here. Sometimes we get the bees building out the frames in these kind of different wavy patterns, or it'll be a little bulbous here and there, but these bees have really made a nice flat sheet of honey. That's great. I have to flick a couple of the bees off. And again, when we shake them, a lot of these bees can't fly for the first 2 weeks of their life. So they're gonna land on the ground right here. They're gonna crawl their way back into the hive. Won't be a problem. Again, these beautiful frames of honey here. And as you can see, this is a good reason why we're wearing our beekeeping suits today. And so eventually when we go harvest this, as you'll see, we're gonna scrape off this wax here with like a special fork for beekeepers. I'm gonna scrape that off, and that'll just remove that thin layer of wax on the surface. Underneath is all that honey, and so then we're gonna put this whole frame in a centrifuge, spin it around, that honey's gonna drip out, and we're gonna strain it from there. So this is what it's gonna look like straight from the hive, and this honey under here is ready to eat. You can see I can score it just a little bit with my hive tool. Right under there is all fresh honey, and that's exactly what's going to be going into your jars. Give them a little bit more smoke. Because for the bees, this is something they've worked hard on all year. They're defensive. They want to know why we're taking it. And we're going to build this hive. As we take these frames of honey away, we're going to also take the box away. We're going to keep them down into one box where the queen is. She's been excluded with the queen excluder. It's a metal grate that she can't fit through. So she's going to stay down here with her baby bees. We're going to take these honey boxes off, and the hive will stay down in one box, and they're going to stay warm through the winter that way. This makes it so there's not too much space for cold air to get in. The bees will cuddle up and stay warm through the winter, and we'll also leave them plenty of food down there in that first box too. We'll take some of these really nice honey frames, make sure they have it down below so they can use that for food. Something else that's really special about each one of these frames of honey, and the hive specifically, is that the taste of the honey is really unique to the flowers in the surrounding area. So bees forage up to 3 miles from their hive. And what they're foraging on are nectar and pollen. And those have their distinct flavors. So whatever flowers the bees find nearby their hive, that's going to be the flavor of the honey. So this hive might taste different than a hive 10 feet away, but drastically different from a hive 3 miles away. So the honey that you receive is very unique to your building. You can almost think of it as like the flavor of the flora in your area. And people always ask me if there's enough foliage, enough flowers and green space in cities for bees to forage on. And it turns out there's an abundance. All these little green spaces or abandoned lots that might have things that you think of as weeds, those are all great sources of food for bees. Now we have parks and forest preserves and urban farms. All of this really helps support native pollinators, not just honeybees, but other pollinators as well. But this also helps us increase diversity in our honey flavor profile too. So this is something that we can do to support honeybees, is continue planting wildflowers, supporting green spaces, and expanding this habitat for honeybees to forage on. All right, we made it back to our Chicago warehouse, and we are currently in our extraction room. So we've just been out at the hive where we harvested some honey from a beehive. We collected one full box, 10 frames of beautiful capped honey that the bees have been working hard all year to produce, and we are deciding to bring back to our office to extract to get that liquid gold that we call honey. We made sure to leave the bees with plenty of honey, so they're going to survive through winter. They've got lots of food. Their population is going to shrink as the weather gets colder. They're going to need less resources, so we're comfortable taking this box of honey for our personal consumption. So this is the first time all year we kind of bring that work from the bees outside of the hives indoors, where we sort of switch gears from monitoring the bees' health and paying attention to the queen's behavior, observing seasonal patterns. We're now indoors working on the honey element of beekeeping, which is a huge part of beekeeping, but only for this part of the year are we really focusing on the honey itself. We've been making sure that the bees are healthy, happy, and thriving so that they can get to a point where they're producing this beautiful honey. So we have a few tools here in our extraction room that are essential for getting the honey out of these frames. So as we mentioned during the harvest, each frame, we saw this like white waxy surface over the cells and over that honey. And that's beeswax that the bees produce, and they cap over their dehydrated nectar. So we saw some liquidy cells, and that was the nectar that the bees are working on dehydrating. They're lowering that water content so it gets thick. We all know honey is nice and sticky. And so once it has a 17% water content, it's thick enough, it's sticky enough, it is that point honey. So we're gonna uncap that waxy surface so that honey that's underneath can kind of fall out nicely. It can be spun out in a centrifuge, which we have here. So we're going to uncap that wax using this fork-like tool here. And this is great at kind of picking off that little waxy surface without digging too deep into the frame. We just want to remove that thin layer of wax. All that honey is stored in those cells below it. So we're going to delicately pick off that wax. Once we've uncapped that frame, we're going to go ahead and throw it in our centrifuge, spin it, strain it, bottle it, and label it. And that is the process of extracting honey. So let's take a look at how this works in action. So I've got my frames of honey here. Here's a beautiful frame that we extracted in our hive earlier. You can see all this white waxy material. You can even see the cells, like the hexagons underneath. While they're a little bit distorted because of the wax, you can see how the bees have followed that hexagon pattern. So in each cell is all of that honey. So we're gonna need to uncap this wax to get to that liquid gold. Put it in our tray here. And then we can begin uncapping with our uncapping fork. So we're gonna just gently pick off this wax. And different beekeepers have different techniques of doing this. You can kind of pry it open and keep a continuous push going, like so, just very gently lifting up that wax seal. And you can see the color changing already. So now we've uncapped that wax and we can see this beautiful light gold color. This one's like a really yellow honey. We're gonna scrape some of that wax just in like a little dump bucket here. Another way of getting this off is just lightly picking at it. This is also an effective method when the frames aren't beautiful and flat like this. Sometimes the bees will have sort of like a bulbous area, or it's kind of wonky, and you need to pick around it. So that's a great way of getting some of the less flat frames uncapped. Now we can see this honey might be a different color than other honey that you have seen or tasted, even from local beekeepers in Chicago. Potentially you've been to a farmer's market and seen an array of different colors of honey. It's kind of like we mentioned when we were out at the hive earlier. That depends on the local flowers that the bees are foraging upon. So that really determines the color and the flavor of the honey. All right, so we're just finishing up our frame here. We've scraped the first side. We're almost done here on the other side of the frame. This is such a fun part of beekeeping. It's nice to get a break from being out at the hives and move indoors and then kind of switch gears a little bit, knowing that we get to bring everybody honey. At this point in the year, everyone's so excited for it. We're excited for it. We get to kind of taste the fruits of our labor and the fruits of the bees' labor as well, because they're really the ones who've been have been working so hard to make this beautiful substance that we love so much. So as we finish up uncapping here, we're going to move to the next phase of extraction, which is really getting that honey off of this frame. And we're going to put that in this centrifuge to my left, where we'll spin it. We'll let gravity kind of pull out this honey. It's going to come down, and we'll let it out this spigot down here. And we'll continue from there. So we are going to grab our uncapped frame. We can see the color is this beautiful yellow and gold. Set it in our centrifuge. When we want to extract many frames at one time, you can see behind me here, I know there's a few things in the way, but we've got these two big centrifuges behind us that are electric, and we'll turn those on when we need to do 12 frames at a time. And we'll just spin those like that and keep those running as we extract multiple boxes of honey. So here we are. We've got 2 frames of uncapped honey in our spinner. We're going to go ahead. We're going to open up this nozzle, and then below it we have a strainer going into another bucket. This is really the only processing that gets done to our honey. So it came from the hive, we uncap it, we're going to spin it here, strain it, and that's exactly what the honey that you are going to get from your beehives will be. There's no other processing that takes place. So I finished spinning my honey here. I can tell by looking at those frames and seeing that they're all empty. I see a little bit of wax residue, but for the most part, the honey has all come out of those frames. And tilt our centrifuge so we can get that honey, the nice flow coming out of our spigot here. Let's see how our honey's looking. Beautiful. So there's just a few little bits of wax, and those will get strained out. Other than that, this honey is ready for consumption. It won't spoil. Again, honey is just the only natural product out there that doesn't have an expiration date. We're gonna seal this up. We'll take a look up close at what our honey looks like here. Beautiful gold honey. It's really light, floral, and those are some of the things that you'll notice in trying different types of honey. You can get this rich, dark honey. You can get some of this light gold floral honey, different notes of mint or lemon or orange, and all of this will depend on what's in bloom at the time the bees are foraging and storing their honey for the winter time. So at that point, we've completed our extraction. We're gonna fill up our little glass jars with this honey throw a label on it, and we're gonna bring it back to you all in a few weeks when we complete our jarring and labeling process. So you've seen the whole picture, start to finish, the season of beekeeping. If you've been following along, we started off by installing your hives or opening them up from the winter. That colony grew in size, we kept monitoring it, we kept adding different levels of bee boxes as those colonies grew. We got up to 3 boxes where the bees were filling up 2 of those boxes with honey. We kept our queen below so she's nice and safe and she's reproducing. And then we came and we harvested the honey, as you saw earlier. We shook those bees off. We let them kind of stay warm and get real nice and tight in their hive at this point in the season. That'll help them stay warm through the winter, and we feel comfortable taking this box of honey that we have here back to our extraction room while we left the bees with plenty of food. And now we have beautiful jarred honey ready for consumption. And it's such a nice treat to have at the end of a hard season of a lot of work, a lot of monitoring these bees, and sharing as much as we can with you all in these times where we don't get as much access to the hives as we would like. But hopefully going forward, we can continue this lovely project and we can get as many of you out to check on the bees as possible. And if not, you can follow along at aveole.buzz. Reach out to us. We'd love to answer more questions, and we hope to continue working with you and keeping your bees nice and safe and happy throughout these cold winter months that are ahead. So it's been a pleasure to share some of our work with you all, and we look forward to talking to you soon.